All right, so there's this brand new movie called Giant, and it's all about one of the most electric, most dazzling champions in boxing history, Prince Naseem Hamed. You've got big stars, a legendary subject. Sounds perfect, right? Well, there's just one problem. The man himself says the movie has absolutely nothing to do with him.
Yep, you heard that right. That's a direct quote from Prince Naseem when someone asked him about the film. He's the subject, the guy the whole thing is about, and he's telling everyone, point blank, it's not my movie. And that one sentence, well, it kicks off this fascinating rabbit hole about truth, about art, and about who really gets to tell your life story.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did a film about a living legend get made completely without him? And maybe even weirder, why is he now, despite everything, actually standing by it? We're going to unpack all of it, and trust me, the answers are not what you'd expect.
Okay, first things first. How is this even possible? How do you make a movie about somebody's life, especially their most personal relationships, without even talking to them?
Well, it turns out it all comes down to a really clever production loophole.
Look, Naz could not be clearer on this. He says he had zero input. None. He claims he only found out the film was completely finished when they brought him in at the last minute, basically just for marketing. No consultation, no permission given, so how'd they pull that off legally?
So according to Naz, this project has been kind of floating around for years, starting and stopping. But after it got revived post-COVID, the filmmakers found their way in. They realized they didn't need Naz's actual life rights because they could buy the rights to something else, unofficial books that had been written about him.
But here's where it gets really wild. Naz says he actually asked the director, "So, is the movie based on those books you bought?" And the director apparently said, "No. The movie's content has nothing to do with the books. They just bought the rights to them as a legal key, a way to unlock the door to making the film without ever using what was inside."
And this really gets to the heart of Naz's problem with the film. Since the story didn't come from him, and it didn't even come from the books, he says a lot of it is just, well, dramatized, or straight up made up. And nowhere is that more obvious, he says, than in how they portray his relationship with his legendary trainer, Brendan Ingle.
Now, to get why this is such a big deal, you have to understand this relationship. It was everything. Naz started with Ingle when he was just 7 years old. For 4 straight years, he wasn't even allowed to punch. It was just footwork, 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 the foundation that created that unbelievable, untouchable style. This bond was, in his words, deeper than family. They spent more time together than with their own family. But, and this is the huge conflict, Naz says that while he can never, ever take away from the incredible fundamentals Ingle gave him, the whole relationship was just tainted by money. He describes Ingle as being completely money-oriented, and even claims Ingle tried to get him, as an 11-year-old kid, to promise him £10 million down the line. It's this really stark contrast between the pure boxing bond he treasured and this constant issue over cash.
Now, just to add another layer of Hollywood weirdness to all this, there's a name on the poster you definitely know: Sylvester Stallone. He's listed as an executive producer. You'd think having Rocky himself on board would be a huge stamp of approval, right? Well, not so fast.
In this just hilarious moment in an interview, Naz openly questions if Stallone was actually involved at all. He basically says, "I think that's by name only," suggesting his name was just slapped on it for publicity. The interviewer insists it's official, Stallone's on board, but Naz just laughs it off. It just perfectly shows the massive gap between the official film production story and the reality from where Naz is standing.
Okay, so we've heard plenty from Naz, but what about the people who actually had to bring this controversial story to life on screen? Well, the actors, they offer a completely different view from inside the production.
Let me tell you, the cast's commitment was off the charts. Amir El-Masry, the guy playing Naz, went through a brutal training regimen, 12 hours a day for 4 weeks to get the physique and, more importantly, that one-of-a-kind movement. Meanwhile, you've got Pierce Brosnan sitting in a makeup chair for hours to physically transform into Brendan Ingle. It was an incredibly intense, short shoot, and by all accounts, they poured their souls into it. And yet, here's the absolute wildest part from their side of things. They never spoke to Prince Naseem, not once during the entire production. Amir El-Masry met the man he was playing for the very first time at the movie's premiere. Can you imagine? Sitting right next to him, watching his life play out on screen, just wondering what he's thinking.
So what was it that the actors saw in the script? For them, this was about way more than just boxing. They keep highlighting the story's deep focus on identity, on racism, on the immigrant experience in Sheffield, for both Naz as a Yemeni British Muslim man and Brendan as an Irishman in England. They saw the movie's real power in its tender, raw, and deeply human moments. Which brings us right back around to our central mystery. If this movie isn't his, if he thinks it's full of made-up stuff, and if nobody even bothered to call him, why on God's green earth is Prince Naseem now out there promoting it?
The answer, honestly, is a stroke of genius. It's a strategic masterclass. Naz realized that since the film was already made and coming out no matter what, he had two choices: fight it or use it. So he decided to back it, to support it, and to use the massive wave of publicity as a springboard for the projects he is in control of, like his own official documentary. It's basically free marketing for his side of the story.
But hold on, the story doesn't end there. It's not just some cold, calculated business decision. Because while Naz was watching this movie that he insists is not his, one particular scene broke through all the inaccuracies, all the drama, and it hit him on a deeply personal, emotional level. And this, right here, is the heart of the whole thing. Naz said the closing scene of the film was incredibly emotional for him, and then he says something just remarkable. "I wish it could only have been like that in real life." It was a make-believe moment. It was fiction. But that fictional scene gave him a sense of peace or reconciliation that, sadly, reality never did.
And that just leaves us with this incredible, thought-provoking final idea. You have a man watching what he calls an untrue version of his own life, and yet he finds a powerful, emotional truth inside its fiction. It really forces you to ask, when a real life gets turned into a story for the big screen, who really owns that story? And where does the truest version of the truth really live?